Welcome to another tech video. So today we are going to be talking about how you can downgrade your firmware on a Draytek switch. So what are the reasons for wanting to downgrade the firmware? So we've got a PoE switch here that we've noticed at one of our customer sites. The access points, the PoE powered access points, these are 910Cs, seem to disconnect on the version of firmware that we're running. So we're running 2.6.2 currently. So what we're going to do is we're going to downgrade the firmware back to the original of 2.4.3, and then we're going to run some tests over a few days with an access point connected to see if it in fact does start dropping off on 2.4.3. So we've noticed that it drops off on version 2.6.2, which is the latest firmware, and running the latest firmware on the 910Cs. So we do have an option where we can change the access point to a 912C. However, that involves spending more money, which we don't want to do really if we absolutely don't need to. So we're going to do some tests. We're going to downgrade the PoE switch to 2.4.3, and then we're going to monitor it over a few days to see whether the access points are disconnecting still. If we need to, what we'll then do is we will then also downgrade the firmware on the access point to see if that makes a difference. But currently, with the latest firmware on the PoE switch and the access point, we're seeing access points drop off and show up as disconnected, even though the PoE status on the switch shows as active. So let's have a look at the switch itself, and then we'll run through how we go about downgrading the firmware. Okay, so the switch we are using is a P1280. As you can see here, it's Draytek smart switch, and it's 24 ports and it's got 4 SFP ports. So we're actually just connecting it to our local network via a single Ethernet cable. So once that's all up and running, which I believe it is now, we can go ahead, log onto the device, and then get the firmware downgraded. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we want to go off and find our switch on the network. So we're going to use Angry IP Scanner for this. Okay, there's one device here that we don't recognize, so 0.122, so let's have a look at that and see if that's our device. Okay, so it is. So we're going to log in with our details. Okay, so here we've got our device, and we can see that we're running version 2.6.7. So what we're going to do is we are going to go to system maintenance, and we're going to go to upgrade manager, and now we want to download the original firmware, which is 2.4.3. so we're going to go to Draytek, do a search for Draytek firmware, and you want to go to draytek.com, not .co.uk, because that gives us the ability to get all the previous versions of older firmware. We're going to click on Draytek FTP, and we're going to find our switch. So we're looking for P1280, which is here. We're going to go to firmware, and we're going to download 2.4.3. You want to click on the firmware here. That will then download, and then we're going to find it in our area here. We're going to double click. Actually, we're going to extract the file to our downloads folder. Okay, there we go. So we've got the .all file, which means it's going to keep our configuration. So that is in our downloads folder. So we're going to make a note of this. We're going to go back to our Draytek switch, and we're going to choose the file, which is in here. We're going to select our firmware. We're going to say open, and the upgrade type is an image, and then we're going to click on apply, and that's going to upgrade the firmware for us. Okay, so that's the firmware upgraded, or I should say downgraded to 243. Now we need to reboot the switch. And then we can log back in. And there we go, you can see that our firmware is now back to 243, which was the original firmware that it shipped with. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect an access point and then leave that running and monitor for the next few days to see if that gives us any disconnects. Okay, so now we've got our switch downgraded. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to connect an access point. So this is a Draytek 912C, so we're going to be leaving the packaging material on there. We're just going to be connecting it. So as you can see, what we've got under here is our a LAN PoE port and a power adapter. So if you've not got a PoE switch, then you can either plug that into the power, or you can use a power injector, so a PoE injector into a standard Ethernet switch, and then that will then power the device. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect this up. So we take the first cable, can choose any port that you want as long as PoE is enabled on the switch, which it is in this one, and then connect the access point, and then that will power on, as you can see here, and then we'll take a look at it on our system. So what we're waiting for, once it's powered up, you will see this LED start blinking, and it should turn a blue colour once we're connected and up and running. Okay, so once we've got the access point connected, it's just a matter of logging back in. And once you've logged back in, you can quite clearly see the device here. It's up and running. It's connected via PoE. So if you click on the interface itself, this gives you the ability to control it, so you can reboot the device from the actual switch by disabling PoE here and then disabling the state. That will then switch off the port and switch off the PoE, and then you can re-enable the two of them to bring it back online. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going through the system to make sure that everything looks normal. And this is our PoE section here, and you can see that the port that we're connected with is using, well, the class is 15.4 watts. It's actually using 3.5 watts at the moment. Okay, this is one of the important things. You want to make sure that your time and date is set correctly. So we've disabled the auto detect time zone, and we've selected our correct time zone with our daylight saving, and then we're also going to go to our time settings and make sure that NTP is enabled so that it can pick up the correct time from the time servers. So in other words, everything is now set correctly on this device. So what we're going to do is we're going to monitor the system over the next few days, and we're going to make sure that our access point stays up and running and doesn't disconnect. And if that resolves the problem, then we will go back to our customer site and downgrade the PoE switch that we've got there to 243 as well, because we know that on the current version 262 we are having problems. So that's all there is to it. If you found that video useful, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave us a comment in the description below if you've got any questions for us. I'd just like to say thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.